It was a cold February night in Tulsa, 1995. Four young men walked into a quick-trip convenience store with a deadly plan. Their target, the night manager, Richard Yost. What should have been just another shift turned into a nightmare that would shock Oklahoma for decades. Richard was ambushed, tied up, and brutally beaten with bats and fists. He was dragged into the store's cooler, where he was left to die. The killers fled with money, merchandise, and even the store's truck. But they left behind something they couldn't erase: blood fingerprints and surveillance footage that sealed their fate. One of those men was Michael Lee Wilson. At just 19 years old, Wilson played a role in the merciless killing that would send him straight to death row. His accomplices were captured and punished too, some sentenced to life, others, like Wilson, condemned to die. For nearly 2 decades, Wilson's lawyers fought to overturn his sentence. Appeals claimed unfair trials, mental health issues, and cruel punishment. But every court had the same answer: guilty. The evidence was undeniable. The crime was unforgettable. And then came January 9th, 2014. In the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, Wilson lay strapped to a gurney as lethal drugs coursed through his veins. His last words would ignite controversy across the nation. He gasped, "I feel my whole body burning." Witnesses were stunned. Critics called it proof that lethal injection was torture in disguise. From a brutal crime in a small convenience store to a chilling death chamber nearly 20 years later, Michael Lee Wilson's story forces us to ask, was this justice served or justice gone wrong? Classification: murderer. Characteristics: robbery. Number of victims: 1. Date of murder: February 26, 1995. Date of arrest: same day. Date of birth: February 18, 1975. Victim profile: Richard Kevin Yost, 30, convenience store clerk. Method of murder: beating with a metal baseball bat. Location: Tulsa. County: Oklahoma, USA. Status: executed by lethal injection in Oklahoma on January 9, 2014. I feel my whole body burning. Last words of man executed by lethal injection in Oklahoma. Michael Lee Wilson was put to death by lethal injection in Oklahoma. Thursday, he was convicted in the murder of his co-worker, Richard Yost. Yost, 30, and Wilson both worked at a Tulsa quick-trip store. Wilson and 3 others brutally beat Yost to death and robbed the store in the early hours of February 25, 1995. After a last meal of stuffed crust pizza and cherry, Dr. Pepper, Wilson was given the injection at 6:06 p.m. His last words were, "I feel my whole body burning," but showed no sign of physical distress. 2 other men were executed for the crime in 2009 and 2011. A third is serving a life sentence, January 10, 2014. A man has been executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary almost 20 years after orchestrating the brutal assault and robbery of his co-worker at a Tulsa convenience store. Michael Lee Wilson was convicted in the killing of Richard Yost, 30, who aspired to one day manage the Quick Trip store. Wilson, who was convicted of first-degree murder, was the 3rd person executed for the February 25, 1995 crime. The 4th defendant is serving a life term. Prison spokesman Jerry Massey said Wilson's time of death was 6:06 p.m. Wilson gave brief remarks twice, at first saying, "I love everybody," then speaking up again after Warden Anita Trammels ordered the execution to begin. "I love the world," he said. "Love my daughters for me. I'm going to miss you always." Within 20 seconds of the execution starting, Wilson's final words were, "I feel my whole body burning." He showed no physical signs of distress. Wilson's sister, Stacy Wilson, sang a hymn throughout the execution, including the line, "His soul is resting, and it's a blessing." When he was pronounced dead, she recited Psalm 23. After the execution, Wilson's mother, Patricia Taylor, stood to capture a final look at her son on the gurney as a curtain began to close, blocking her view. Wilson's fiancé sobbed beside her. Earlier in the day, he ate his last meal, which consisted of a stuffed crust pizza with Parmesan cheese as a final meal, along with a cherry Dr. Pepper, a pomegranate, and cherry mashed candy. Yost's family denied an interview request, but issued a statement noting the third of 3 executions was behind them. "Closure will be not hearing this on the news and reading about it in the paper," the family said in a statement issued by Angela Hauser, Yost's widow. "That is my closure. Not to relive his death over and over, but to remember the good times." Before the crime, the men loitered nearly an hour while waiting for customers to leave. Once they were gone, they struck Yost with an aluminum baseball bat 54 times in 131 seconds. They jostled a safe while removing it, but Wilson posed as Yost when a security company called to check an alarm. And to dampen suspicions among middle-of-the-night customers, Wilson put on Yost's uniform and worked the cash register as Yost lay dying in a pool of blood beer and milk behind the cooler doors. The State Board of Pardon and Parole last month rejected Wilson's clemency request on a 4-1 vote. Ahead of the hearing, Assistant Attorney General Jennifer Miller told the panel that Wilson knew Yost had to die, so he couldn't identify his robbers. Police trailed Wilson after he didn't show up for work later that day and stopped all 4 men in a car about 14 hours after the crime. They carried multiple rolls of $5 bills and had pairs of Nike Air tennis shoes with the price tags still attached. Wilson told officers that the 4 had planned for 2 weeks to rob and kill Yost, and a week before the killing, even Yost knew something was up. He asked a police officer to increase patrols in the area because he believed Wilson and his friends intended to rob him. The assault was captured on the store's surveillance system. Video of Wilson stuffing money in his pockets and audio of the bat striking Yost as he pleaded for mercy. The repeated sounds of the baseball bat striking Mr. Yost and Mr. Yost's screams will never leave my mind, Tulsa Assistant District Attorney James D. Dunn wrote to the parole board. Dunn was a bailiff during the defendant's preliminary hearings in 1995. Yost, 30, had worked at the store 3 months. In small talk, 14 minutes before the assault began, Wilson asked Yost what kind of future he thought he had with the company. According to a summary of the case by the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, Yost told Wilson of his desire to manage the store someday. Wilson, who was 19 at the time of the killing, laughed at Yost's answer and then replied, "For real." Darwin Brown, 32, was executed in January 2009, and Billy Don Alverson, 39, was executed in January 2011. The 4th defendant, Richard Harjo, who was 16 at the time of the crime and is now 35, was sentenced to life in prison. Wilson will be the 100th person executed by the state of Oklahoma since statehood. 52 will remain on death row after Wilson's death. He is the first to be executed in the state in 2014, Thursday, January 9, 2014. McAllister. Last of 3 men condemned to die for the brutal beating of a Tulsa convenience store clerk 18 years ago was executed Thursday. Michael Lee Wilson was put to death for the slaying of Richard Yost, who was beaten to death at a Quick Trip store at 215 N Garnett Road. The execution occurred at 6 p.m. at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister, and Wilson was pronounced dead at 6:06 p.m. I love everybody. Free is free, Wilson said in his last statement. I am going home. I'm ready to go. I love you, world. Wilson asked a correctional officer if his microphone was still active and then continued his statement. Love my daughters for me. I'm going to miss you always. After a brief silence, Wilson said, I feel my whole body burning. Wilson's mother and 4 other family members witnessed the execution, his sister singing a hymn as the execution occurred. The execution was witnessed by Yost's widow, Angela Yost, and his 2 grown sons, who were 2 and 8 at the time of the killing, as well as his mother-in-law. Yost's family issued a written statement after the execution. This is the 3rd and last one. Closure will be not hearing this on the news and reading about it in the paper. That is my closure, not to relive his death over and over, but to remember the good times. Wilson worked at the store with Yost 30 and later told police that he and 3 other men had planned the crime weeks in advance. The men dragged Yost to the back of the store, handcuffed him, and bound his ankles. Evidence showed. A security camera captured Wilson smiling and helping customers at the cash register while Yost was beaten to death with a baseball bat in the back of the store. A customer who entered the store about 6 a.m., February 26, 1995, and saw no attendant found Yost's body in a walk-in cooler. The men stole a safe from the store and the videotape from the security camera, both among items later recovered by police. Wilson, 19 at the time, was arrested later that day with his co-defendants. Tulsa County District Attorney Tim Harris witnessed the execution along with Tulsa County Sheriff Stanley Glanz. Harris said the crime remains one of the most disturbing in his career as a prosecutor. Wilson, went out and waited on customers while Mr. Yost was being held there. They pre-planned this, Harris said. In a filing prepared for Wilson's clemency hearing, the State Attorney General's office said, evidence in Yost's death shows beyond any doubt that defendant Wilson masterminded the crime. The crime could not have been committed without defendant due to his status as a store employee. During the clemency hearing, December 16, Wilson apologized to Yost's family for the harm he had caused them. For that, I'm truly sorry, he said during a teleconference from prison. I was young, foolish. I'm a different person now. The Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board voted 4-1 to deny clemency for Wilson. Code. Defendant Darwin Demond Brown, 18 at the time of Yost's murder, was executed in 2009. Billy Don Alverson, who was 24 at the time, was executed in 2011. The 4th defendant, Richard Harjo, was 16 at the time of the murder. Now 35, he is serving a life prison sentence without the possibility of parole. In a letter to the Pardon and Parole Board, Quick Trip Corp. Chairman and CEO Chester E. Cadew III asked that clemency be denied. He said the company conducted counseling sessions for employees who were all thinking, it could have been me. Quick Trip conducted counseling sessions with over 400 people to help them understand the wickedness behind this crime, consoling them and trying to convince them this would never happen again. This murder had a devastating effect on Quick Trip. Cadew disputed Wilson's claims of remorse for the crime, noting that Wilson and his co-defendants shopped at a mall after the crime. They each bought new tennis shoes with the cash stolen from the register. That's not what I call remorse. How sad that, to Michael Lee Wilson, a life is only worth a new pair of Nikes. The Oklahoma Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty held a silent vigil to protest the execution outside the governor's mansion in Oklahoma City on Thursday evening. We are grieved that the state of Oklahoma is choosing to end this life and destroy another family as they prepare for the execution of Michael Lee, Wilson said, Adam Leathers, co-chairman of the coalition in a statement released before Wilson's execution. We also send our thoughts and prayers to the family of Richard Yost, as well as those who must carry out this execution. Thursday, January 9, 2014. The last of 3 men who were condemned to die for the 1995 fatal beating of a Tulsa convenience store clerk is set to be executed this evening. Michael Lee Wilson is scheduled to be put to death for the slaying of Richard Yost, who was beaten to death at a Quick Trip store at 215 N Garnett Road. A customer who entered the store about 6 a.m. February 26, 1995, and saw no attendant found Yost's body in a walk-in cooler. Wilson worked at the store with Yost 30 and later told police that he and 3 other men had planned the crime weeks in advance. The men dragged Yost to the back of the store, handcuffed him, and bound his ankles. Evidence showed. A security camera captured Wilson smiling and helping customers at the cash register while Yost was beaten to death with a baseball bat in the back of the store. The men stole a safe from the store and the videotape from the security camera, both among items later recovered by police. Wilson, 19 at the time, was arrested later that day with his co-defendants. Records show that less than 6 months before Yost's death, Wilson supplied ammunition that was used in a fatal drive-by shooting. In a filing prepared for Wilson's clemency hearing, the State Attorney General's office said evidence in Yost's death shows beyond any doubt that defendant Wilson masterminded the crime. The crime could not have been committed without defendant due to his status as a store employee. When Wilson was questioned by police, he said he and his co-defendants planned on robbing the Quick Trip and that he knew Yost would be killed, court records state. He said that they had been talking about the robbery for 2 weeks. The plan was for him to assume the role of sales clerk once Yost was taken care of. During the clemency hearing, December 16, Wilson apologized to Yost's family and the harm he had caused them. "For that, I'm truly sorry," he said during a teleconference from prison. "I was young foolish. I'm a different person now." The Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board voted 4-1 to deny clemency for Wilson. Code key: defendant Darwin Demond Brown, 18 at the time of Yost's murder, was executed in 2009. Billy Don Alverson, who was 24 at the time, was executed in 2011. The 4th defendant, Richard Harjo, was 16 at the time of the murder. Now 35, he is serving a life prison sentence without the possibility of parole. After Alverson's execution, Yost's widow, Angela Yost, released a statement. "This execution will not bring Richard back, nor will it give me the closure that I am looking for," she wrote. "To be honest, I do not know if I will ever have true closure." Yost was a father of 2 sons, ages 2 and 8, when he died. During Wilson's trial, Yost's widow and mother talked about the crime's impact. Angela Yost said her husband worked nights, but would stay up for hours after his shift ended to attend school activities with his boys. "The most important things in life for Richard and me were to raise the boys the best we could," she testified. "When that was done, then we could do what we wanted. Richard and I put our needs and wants to the side because we thought we had a lifetime together. But now I know that one person can change a family's life in a matter of minutes. One day, you will have everything, and the next day, you are living in hell for the rest of your life." Yost's mother, Alma Dorn, testified during Wilson's trial that her son was a good father, a husband, and son with a good moral sense of right and wrong. "I respected him as well as his opinion. He was my emotional security. He told me he would take care of me in my old age and not to worry about anything in the future," she said. "I knew he would always be there for me, and now he's gone." Wilson's execution, the first of 2014, is set for 6 p.m. at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. The Oklahoma Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty plans a silent vigil to protest the execution outside the governor's mansion in Oklahoma City. We are grieved that the state of Oklahoma is choosing to end this life and destroy another family as they prepare for the execution of Michael Lee Wilson, said Adam Leathers, co-chairman of the coalition. We also send our thoughts and prayers to the family of Richard Yost, as well as those who must carry out this execution. And so the story of Michael Lee Wilson closes in a prison chamber 2 decades after the night that changed everything. In 1995, a young store manager named Richard Yost was beaten to death in the back of a convenience store for nothing more than money, cigarettes, and greed. His family lost a son, a husband, a father. They carried that grief for almost 20 years, waiting for the moment when justice would finally arrive. For Wilson, those 20 years were spent behind bars, fighting every appeal, clinging to every chance that the courts might spare his life. But no argument could erase the images from the surveillance cameras. No lawyer could rewrite the horror of that night. When the final date came, there was no more delay, no more excuses. On January 9, 2014, the drugs entered his body. The room fell silent. And then came words that would echo far beyond the walls of the prison. "I feel my whole body burning." Those words shocked witnesses, ignited fierce debates, and reopened one of America's most painful questions. Is lethal injection truly humane, or is it just another form of cruelty hidden behind a sterile mask? For the family of Richard Yost Wilson's death closed a chapter, but it could never erase the scars of that February night. For critics of the death penalty, his final statement became a rallying cry against executions. And for history, Michael Lee Wilson remains a symbol of how violence leaves ripples that last far longer than a single act. Justice was delivered, but the fire of his final words still burns in memory, leaving us to wonder, did the punishment fit the crime? Or did it reveal something darker about us all?